Sebastian was sick and tired of having to sit around every day while he watched his own people die. You see, he was a high-ranking Roman official who guarded the jail in the reign of an emperor who was persecuting Christians. And Sebastian lived with a deep, dark secret. The secret was that he himself was a Christian. You see, the emperor had been persecuting these Christians for over a month now, and over that month, Sebastian's faith had slowly started to deteriorate from, oh, they're never going to catch me, to, what if they catch me, and what will they do to me? And he began to live in fear, and his emotions started to build up inside of him, and he didn't go into public anymore. And maybe that was why on this one day he just couldn't take it anymore. Maybe it was because of all the emotions. Maybe it was because of all the people he had seen die for their faith. But on this one day, he just couldn't take it anymore, as he saw two Roman soldiers beating and whipping two men towards his gates. And he ran out to them, and he told the soldiers to release the men. And of course, the soldiers had their doubts, but he was in a higher rank than them, so they had to listen. And they turned and left the two young men to Sebastian. And as soon as they were out of sight, Sebastian he turned toward them and looked over his shoulder to make sure that nobody was looking. And he told them his secret. He told them that he was Christian. He was a Christian that was impersonating a Roman, so that he could survive. And he told them that he was going to let them escape. And so as he pretended to take him over to the gates of the prison, he tripped over a twig, and the two young men ran out in the back of the prison and ran off away as far away as they could from Rome. And a villager, upon seeing this, thought, Sebastian didn't even go after them. That seemed suspicious, and so he went to the emperor, reported the suspicious behavior. And the emperor told his guards to go and take Sebastian, and Sebastian was brought before the emperor. And the emperor found him guilty of not only letting two young men escape, but also being a Christian himself. And the emperor was furious that one of his top guards, one of his top soldiers, had betrayed him. And so Sebastian was thrown into jail. And the next morning after breakfast, the two guards took him out, and they dragged him across Rome, and as villagers stuck their heads out of the door and thought, what in the name of the emperor is happening here? And they dragged him all the way up to the front of the palace, and they tied him to one of those fancy pillars in front of the gates of the emperor's palace. And villagers started to gather around until there was a big crowd, and Sebastian was tied up there, unable to move. And then the emperor came out of the midst of the crowd with archers beside him. And as soon as the crowd started to see the archers, the silence spread across, and the emperor said something to the archers, and the archers started to shoot. First an arrow pierced his arm, and then maybe his leg, and then his shoulder, until he was covered in arrows head to toe, and barely able to breathe, and barely able to live. And finally, when he couldn't take anymore, the archers stopped shooting, and they left him to. The sun was beating down on him, and he hung there for hours in an uncomfortable position, barely able to breathe, barely conscious. And finally, a young woman whose duty it was to untie the body and bury it came up, and she started to untie his ankles, and he gave out a little, and the lady stood back and noticed that he was alive and opening one of his eyes, and so she quickly untied the rest of his bands, and she took him to her little hut. And this lady was named Irene. She was a poor Christian woman who also lived in the same fear of being found out. And so she took him back home, and she nursed him back to health, and by some miracle, he was able to walk in a month of her healing him, and his arrow wounds started to close, and over another miracle, or by some other miracle, over the course of 4 months, he was able to get back up, and he had all the physical abilities that he had in his former job. And now Sebastian was angry, and he went out to live in the shadows and to live in secret, and he gathered up followers all over Rome, Christians, and he gathered up Christians, and he converted people to Christianity, and then he heard that the emperor would be walking through in a parade through the town, and so he thought, this is just the right time. This is the right opportunity that I've been waiting for. And so he took all of his buddies, and they all got a front row seat at the end of the parade. And as the emperor was going through was about to end the parade, as soon as Sebastian saw him, he started shouting out at the emperor, and his followers, who were all around, started to stone the emperor. And the emperor, of course, he was shocked that Sebastian was alive, and he was shocked that people were not treating him with respect, and he was shocked that they were stoning him. And so 2 guards took shields on his sides, and he ran towards the palace. And this time when Sebastian was arrested, he didn't come out of the the 8 gates that he had gone into. But Saint Sebastian is always known for remaining strong in God.